Next up, we have our second panel, State of the Games Industry. So, welcome back. Nick Dixon and Imre Yelling will be again leading this session. So, over to you, Nick and Imre.
So I think we're also joined by Mark Backler online. Hopefully he's ready to join us, and I'm going to see Mark's lovely face appearing on the monitor. If not, we're going to wait. We won't wait. We'll carry on. But if Mark can be brought onto the screen, that would be great. So I'm going to introduce Lily and Violet Adams. Hey, there he is. Hello, Mark.
Hey.
You've had a haircut since last we spoke.
I have, yeah. I feel a bit.
They didn't finish it though, Mark.
Here as well, looking down over everyone.
I say this in envy, you understand. So Lily and Violet are, if it wasn't clear, are the twin sister freelance duo, Nerd Pirates. Together they do bold, buzzworthy PR, marketing and comms in the world of video games, tech and entertainment. Previous clients include the BAFTA-nominated Threefold Games, Virtual Umbrella, Digital Catapult, revolutionary cloud tech company, Polystream, and they're proud specialists in all things nerd culture and fandom. That's excellent. And frequently work together with legendary licenses and IP. I'd also like to introduce Mark. Mark was a recent guest speaker with us as well, so some of you I know are familiar with Mark. Mark, he's worked in the games industry for 16 years, companies like EA, Lionhead, Sony, and worked on games including Harry Potter, Order of the Phoenix, and the BAFTA award-winning Fable 2. And has now founded Sketchbook Games, who recently released the multi-award-winning Lost Words Beyond the Page. I can absolutely recommend it. It's a fabulous experience and a really heartfelt, emotive experience. An atmospheric puzzle platformer that's set inside a diary and see players using words as platforms, and also features a story by renowned games writer Rihanna Pratchett. And then I'd like to introduce Katie Good. Since 2008, Katie's worked in the industry. In 2014, she co-founded Triangular Pixels, along with her partner, John Campbell, a game studio based in Bude in Cornwall, and loves to experiment with new technology to see how it can create entirely new gameplay experiences for players, and believes in using games design and technology for good in the likes of education and health. Non-dev talents include talks, panels, workshops, mentoring, and consultancy. I would also add, because not your bio, but you're also BAFTA Breakthrough Brits in 2018?
I don't know what year, but...
2018. I was there, so I should know, but I think it was 2018. Anyway, welcome to the panel. So this panel is about the state of the games industry, which, okay, we'll be here a week then. So let me just ask a really broad question then. What's the state of the games industry from your perspective? All right, so over to Lily and Violet then. See you in about half an hour.
Thank you. I guess maybe I'll just pick one strand so we don't go completely
just one
mad here. But the one strand I guess we could probably highlight at the moment is looking at working from home and how the games industry is completely being transformed by what happened during the pandemic, but also I think a trend which probably predates the pandemic actually and is kind of continuing to accelerate. But I mean, we as freelance duo, we've been working away from offices for a very long time. But I think a lot of games companies right now are experiencing that they need to shift their work environment to accommodate people working from home, or to understand how they can support people working from home in a very different and more nuanced way. Someone's winning over there, I think. Well done. But yeah, I think that's a massive big shift in the industry that maybe hasn't affected people like us so much. But I think many of the larger companies that have a massive employee roster are having to deal with a really big shift there.
I mean, also, like, adding to that actually is the opportunity. So we were working at home for, like, since we've started back in, like, I'd say 2014-ish. And obviously moving down here to Cornwall, you just assume, okay, well, I guess that's no more expos, that's no more shows, that's no more networking, etc. There's nobody around, well, especially in Bude, let's face it. But actually, what the online, like, I guess, industry now is being online. Now suddenly we're able to go to, like, the games finance market and things like that. Like, the publishers are much more willing to actually meet online than necessarily having to meet them at this show or that show, which means travel, accommodation, hotel, time, and things like that. So obviously it's had its very dark downside, but at the same time, actually, it has meant the industry is now spreading, and we're having people that are working at Unreal and Unity and stuff, then they're moving down here in Cornwall because they can do that. So yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, Mark, how about yourself?
So I think it's really interesting the new platforms that we're seeing, and like with VR and AR, and there's sort of so many new opportunities, and we're seeing games really kind of expand and bring in even broader, more diverse audiences, and the pandemic just seemed to kind of accelerate that change, really, more people coming to games and seeing the sort of power for positivity and like social connections that the industry can help facilitate.
So I think this is one where I think we do want to get involved in to a degree. So what about, from your point of view, Emma, what's for you the kind of big headline for you for the state of the games industry?
So I think that there are a few things that everyone should keep in mind and consider. Obviously, new technologies being mentioned, some of them controversial, some of them not, from going from VR to NFTs to whatever. And it's like it or not, you need to be aware, because even though some of these tools might not have lived up to their potential or been abused, could turn into something positive at one point or another. But even if you're not interested, it's good to know about them. And so it is changing so rapidly that it is a tough job to keep up of all the latest technologies and all the in development, in your tool chains, in everything. It's worth questioning yourself. But then the other one is that how the industry is shifting towards subscription-based services, and how that will change in particular for small and mid-sized studios of your output. Because suddenly your discussion is not just necessarily about, okay, I need a publisher who is going to fund my game, but I need an investor who gives money to my company, but you have to think, will my game fit not just to be sold on Steam or console, but will any of the big services will want to pick it up, and how much money I can get. So I heard already that some people are changing their design to design games where they think is more likely to be picked up by these services, and instead of saying, I'm going to make this game and sell 1 million copies, what they are saying is that, no, I'm going to make this game and specifically sell it to a subscription service. So subscription and other services, keep in mind, because it can fundamentally shift your business and your game design. And then lastly, which I think is the best thing about this industry, is that every year you still have multiple stories of not just huge AAA games doing well, but also tiny indie games coming around and compared to their investment doing really, really well. And just like, don't be disheartened. Everyone will tell you is like, there is 1 quadrillion game launched on Steam per second. It's like, yeah, it's true, but also most of them are crap. So there is room, and every year you can see that there are breakout hits, but even if you ignore them, there are many games which are doing enough money to make the company survive, make them fight another day, and that's what you want, right? So I think those will be my biggest.
Yeah, just on that point, I think I'd want to add that the word games is kind of becoming, to me at least, a bit of a difficult and meaningless term in some ways, because, I mean, we work across tech and entertainment and games, and what is a game? What is a gamified experience? Is the 3D internet of the future, buying online, a gamified game experience? I don't know, and I don't think really anybody knows what the future of games might hold. So if you're coming here and you're considering yourselves, hey, I'm just a game developer, I make traditional, roguelite or RPGs or whatever, I think maybe something to think about is expanding what you think of as the word game, and just think that actually being a member of the games industry doesn't always mean making traditional player experiences. It can mean a whole range of things. So I guess my thought would be, as we move on in the industry and we grow up a bit as an industry, we're going to be touching so many more touch points than just traditional play. So just think more broadly about what that might mean for you and what you're interested in.
Definitely, yeah. We're seeing different industries kind of converge a lot with the virtual production stuff, and seeing lots of really popular TV shows like The Mandalorian using game engines like Unreal and Unity. And so I think, game development skills and companies, there's so many kind of new opportunities and cool angles, avenues that didn't exist before.
Well, most of the big, I suppose publishers, first parties are involved in the film industry in some way in the development of software and visual effects. So I think that is a really big, very obvious shift now. Let's also talk about our audience then and what the state of the industry means for our audience. I'm very interested from your perspective, what the challenges are on now reaching a very, very broad, increasingly diverse, quite segmented and siloed audience in respect of platforms and age groups. It's becoming very distinct. What are the challenges there, and what is the state of the industry as far as they're concerned?
I mean, there's so many things to talk about with audience. I think one of the main things people get wrong, and we work in marketing, so much of our job is about audience. How do we get your game in front of the right people? How do we make sure you're saying the right things to those people? I think from our perspective, it's actually a little bit back to basics sometimes to realize you're not selling to gamers. What is a gamer? I don't think that demographic really exists. I think gamers are very diverse and have very different interests. And one of the things we specialize in is saying, okay, if you're selling a game that has a license in it, so it's an Adventure Time game, it's a Steven Universe game, those people might want to see different things to, a first-person shooter. So I think it's just about bearing in mind that human nature is people want to see things that excite them. It's not just about saying, hey, we're going to do traditional gamery things. Do you want to add? Yeah, partly with your question, looking at platform is complex. And maybe I feel like we're kind of harping on this one, but I think right now the kind of gatekeeping that happens in the industry between like a mobile gamer, for example, a lot of people would say, I hear this story a lot, my friend plays mobile games. They're not really a gamer. But I think that we're challenging those assumptions every day in the industry. And I think that as more of us understand how kind of holistic our industry is, we're going to see those boundaries break down a lot. And so this kind of platform wars, it's never going to disappear. But I think as gatekeeping is slowly removed from our industry and from our kind of culture more generally, it's not going to be like, oh, she plays mobile games and I only play Xbox. I think people are going to begin to understand that we can have cross-platform interests, or if you're obsessed with one particular platform, that's okay, and it's not a pejorative thing. It's not like, ugh, can't believe they play, tabletop. Ugh. It's not like that anymore. And I think that we'll see that grow. Maybe that's my positive take. I'm sure there's a negative take as well.
Casey?
So, I guess in line with trying to see the fact that we're having much more bigger, diverse audience now, it means as game developers, as indie dev, there's much more opportunity there to create the story, the narrative, the gameplay that's really niche, and actually there be a big enough market for it now. I know a developer who really does just focus on basically electronic card games, and they are doing exceptionally well, and their business is growing year on year because now they've got a very small particular market niche that's growing and growing because the whole audience is growing and growing. So I think you're right, this stylo effect has potentially always actually held back the games that we've been seeing. Because an indie dev will go to a publisher will go, oh, there's not the market for it, and then you won't get the funding, don't get to see that game. And I think actually we're seeing from the publishers now much more of awareness of the fact that there's interesting new stories to be heard, and they're much more willing to listen to a more diverse range of developers, see a more diverse range of stories, and for example, unpacking being this absolutely international phenomenon, and it's the story, I don't want to give it too much away, but it's definitely not a story I would have seen 10 years ago, should we put it like that.
If I could just very quickly just add one more thing just to your point there, I think actually we'd be remiss not to mention wholesome games in this as a massive audience expansion that is just huge right now. So I think that maybe would be a quick trend just to kind of pop in there. But yeah, wholesome games is a massive audience. It's been there all along. There's been those who will always spend Dragon Age just customizing Sarah. But I think it's even bigger than it ever has been.
It's interesting, Mark, isn't it? Because in some ways, Lost Words is a wholesome game, isn't it?
Yeah. We had some really good support from Wholesome Games for Lost Words. But when we started developing the game, it didn't really seem like such a thing, and we didn't know if if there was, you know, the right audience there. And yeah, so it's really brilliant to see this spring up and such a lot of support and so many new types of games as well, like like lo-fi chill beats to write to. It's just yeah, you know, we didn't get stuff like that in the past, and you know, you wouldn't have known if it would have really worked. But yeah, such an amazing community as well. Like, yeah, the concept of it, you would just think people would troll each other and it wouldn't work, but they've done such a brilliant job, and yeah, have a wonderful community with it. And yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. We're going to, you know, see more different kinds of games and more new genres and more kind of communities like the Wholesome Games one that spring up that, yeah, we kind of hadn't really even foreseen in the past.
It's. I think there's one word that I picked up on which you used, which I think is true, and that's the word opportunity. I think that's, for me, one of the biggest things. Like when we first started out in the industry, you were looking in the back of Edge magazine for a role. There'd be a handful of roles. It's very, very hard to break into. There were no university courses. There was no ready access to engines. All engines were in-house tech team delivered monstrosities. There were big unwieldy ships, you know, and it was incredibly hard to break into. And even though with the increase in opportunity, you have an increase in competition, and that's probably the biggest thing, which is the amount of people trying to enter the industry, the amount of games trying to vie for attention for an increasingly limited amount of audience time. With that opportunity comes competition, doesn't it? So what would you say are your kind of go-tos for overcoming that competition that you now face in your own kind of part of the sector?
I mean, for us, I completely unsubscribed from a lot of subreddits to do with VR and things because it wasn't good for my mental
health. As it happens.
So, like, but otherwise, like, you have to be aware of what is on the market. You have to keep on those trends. But you also have to allow yourself the space to think of your own things and be confident in your own ideas. Obviously, you know, go away and do your market research, like, but also put it in front of players, like put it in front of players today at small events, big events at the bar or whatever. And as I say, like, if you do start to find that niche, maybe there's a niche community you can start to get feedback from. You know, having them as part of that development of that game in some way or form is also like another ongoing thing that's a possibility. So, yeah, like there is obviously a lot of competition out there, but also comes with that is because games are so sort of getting there socially acceptable, the amount of industries, as you mentioned previously, that outside of games traditionally are suddenly after game developers is going through the roof. So, you know, we're working, consulting on something at the moment, which is not necessarily seen as traditionally a game. We've worked with a mental health hospital, again, not traditionally a game, but like this is just the NHS coming to us and things like that, like non-games people going, we want game-like things. Actually, can you make this, you guys know how to make fun things, real-time things, VR things, AR things, like you know how to do this, can you do it for us? And especially when you're starting off as like a small studio or something and you haven't got that publishing money behind you, like having that bit of contract work and working on that sort of thing, like you get to learn new things, you get to learn new skills, you get to develop your own internal tools and things, and of course bring some money into your studio and pay for the rest of the day's work on your own stuff. So yeah, like there's competition, but there's also still opportunities like that.
Maybe Mark, you want to comment? As obviously you launched an indie game yourself and arriving to this market. How did you feel about this? Do you feel that you got your time under the sun, or do you think you were, you know, lost in the crowd?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult situation with announcing games because from what I understand, there was a golden era at one time when you could just release a game on Steam and just, you know, the prestige of being a Steam game meant you'd sell 50,000 units plus, and now there's so many games that, you know, hardly selling a copy on there, and so yeah, it's all about how to make your game stand out, and yeah, it can definitely be be tricky. I guess sort of lots of testing to figure out how your game works well, your community, and then sort of building that up over time. It is difficult that we try to put in lots of effort. I focused a lot of attention on Twitter, which I think was probably the wrong platform, because everyone now says like Twitter's really good for talking to game developers, but not so much for talking to players. And so it seems TikTok is the platform of the moment for kind of reaching a bigger mainstream audience of game players, but I haven't got around to actually making a TikTok. I've been watching them and trying to learn from them and see what's good, but my dancing skills aren't so brilliant, so maybe I'm not so cut out for it. Also, humour works really well for TikTok, so I guess I've just been trying to think of what might be good, what might fit our brand. That definitely seems like a really good way of getting your game out there these days. And because I mean, often social media platforms, they can kind of change their algorithms over time, and they can get less friendly, or what used to be a really good platform for discovery. As the algorithm changes, as their advertising model changes, then things can sort of go downhill a bit. But TikTok definitely seems like it's at the kind of golden era when before they start fiddling around with things. So yeah, it's quite good for, even if you don't have a huge following on there, if your content is good, then it can rise to the top really easily. And so lots of developers seem to be doing very well with that, having a lot of success with kind of boosting their Steam numbers, and people have been posting graphs of, you can see they've kind of got a steady baseline, and then they start doing TikTok and sort of the numbers start going through the roof. But it's like any of these things, I guess there's a certain degree of luck involved as well. So yeah, definitely can be tricky.
I mean, game discoverability is a huge topic. I think there are many different ways of approaching it. One of the things we're always telling developers is start early and build discoverability into your development process. Do not make a game and then go, hey, oh my gosh, how the hell are we going to market this thing? Do people want to play this? How are we going to talk about this? Have those conversations with your dev team, or if you are a dev and you're having to put your marketing hat on, as often happens with small teams, just build that into your early process and understand from the start, who are we targeting, where are we targeting them, and what position in the market will this game sit in. And sometimes you won't know straight away, and that's fine, but you need to do your research and do the data-driven research you need to do. The only other thing, just as a hobby horse of mine, is it's really great to be trendy, and it's really great to do things that get eyeballs on your game, but I'm always telling people about the quality of those eyeballs. I've seen, B2B corporates saying, we really want to be on this trendy or TikTok or whatever, not so much in the B2C space where it's brilliant, but if you're just saying we want to raise the profile of our studio, let's get a TikTok, you think, well, who's on there? Who's seeing these TikToks? Are they going to call you up and have a business conversation with you tomorrow? Probably not. But they might go and wishlist your game, in which case that's really useful. So just think about the quality of the eyeballs you're getting, not just getting eyeballs for the sake of getting eyeballs. And if I could also just add one other thing on that front, which is to do with the understanding of like the competition that you have and you have to cut through. I think there's this weird understanding of marketing as kind of evil. Like marketeer people are like, want to quash your creativity or kill your game. And I actually think that, maybe it's because I am a marketeer and I like to think of what we do as a creative job. But I think if you've got the right kind of marketing team with you, or you have the right kind of marketing approach, that should be a creative part of what you do. It should be something that gets you out of bed in the morning and go, wow, I can't wait to showcase our game to these people in this exciting way, to get them fired up. That's how you cut through noise, I think, in a way where you're not like, I've put all this effort into my UI, my tutorial, making sure players get into this game and really enjoy it. And then when it comes to showcasing my game, I kind of think of that as like somehow corporate or unpleasant. Actually, that's a creative opportunity for you as a small team or a big team to do something which is going to get people as excited about your game as you are. So I guess that's mine. Marketing isn't evil. We're not evil people. We're not there just to crunch numbers. I don't believe any good work ever comes out of just wanting to say, no, we'll do it as kind of quick and as corporate as possible. There is creativity in this industry everywhere.
So what I'm hearing is a marketeer trying to sell me marketing.
You found us out. Come to the dark side.
That's what
I think it's
Sales marketing.
So,
something.
sorry,
Lots of
Malcolm.
developers fall foul of that they don't want to they just want to make the game and they don't put that effort into the development into the marketing, when actually it's so important. Like you say, you need to be thinking about it from the beginning, and like Emily was saying earlier, you have to think of the platform opportunities now, and what would work well on Game Pass or Apple Arcade and stuff, and if you want to make those kinds of games, then brilliant, and it makes your job so much easier later on when the game is helping to market itself because it's sort of well targeted. Also, Simon Carlos's mailing list, Game Discoverability Co. is really good. Definitely recommend for people to sign up to that. It's free to get a couple of emails from that a week, and it's got loads of really great content in there.
So something which is worth sometimes stopping and making a step back is that if you look at, depends on what numbers you're looking at. If you look at the number of game launched or number of developers, sure, there is competition, no question about that, there will always be. But just it's worth making that step back and realizing that more people are making more money in games than ever before. And it's like, you can say that I'm pushed out of the market, or actually you aren't. The market is getting bigger, and it's getting bigger, more product is coming in. The development tools absolutely made a change. When I started, many of these games that the students here are doing in a few months to a year, or on a prototype you can build in a game jam. At the early days of games development, and my early days in game development, it took us months, if not a year, to get to the same point. So, and it's true, easy tools make a lot of the entry easier, but I just challenge you to think of it this way. Do you think that every musical instrument was given out for free? Would there be a bigger competition for the best music? Yeah, there would be some people who were pushed out of the market because they never had a chance to buy a musical instrument. Sure, they would show up, but it wouldn't change fundamentally. There still would be good singers and bad singers, and good musicians and bad musicians. It's just, and I know it's tough to hear because I worked on both good games and bad games, and successful and unsuccessful, and it's not even a relationship. It's not even that necessarily that you make a good game and you're going to be successful, but it's a tough market. But I don't think you can get in with this kind of doom and gloom, because that's just not true. It's just the reality of it. But I wanted to ask a question, because I think it's time to make it a bit spicier. What is your controversial hot take in the games industry? Is there something that you think that on Reddit you would go into controversial, that some people would heavily upvote you and some people would heavily disagree with you? Who wants to go? Who's the bravest?
So I guess my controversial hot take would be that you don't necessarily need to go down the investor route, like seed funding and things like that, equity sharing and things. Obviously, there's a lot of support to be able to do that sort of thing, but there are alternative, potentially, ways. It ultimately depends on what your sort of goals are, what sort of scale you want to be, what sort of things you want to do, and that is one route. But otherwise, there are means and ways you could just sort of, as you say, do contracting or freelancing and start to weigh your way up like that. That's my controversial take.
I don't know. I mean, just talking about freelancing and contracting and things, I guess this is not, maybe it's a lukewarm take. I don't know if it's a hot take, but that there's a lot of people trying to sell you a traditional employment method in the games industry. And for many people that works. And I'm not saying that's not a great route. Many people enjoy that route and get the best out of it. But for us, our route was freelance, not being employed, because we could punch above our weight much faster. People did not want us, when we first joined the industry, to come in and be in charge. They wanted us to come in and, understandably, go up the chain of command. And by going freelance, doing our own stuff,
showing people that we have talent, and then coming in and really punching above our weight, we managed to grow a lot faster than we would have done, I believe, in our personal circumstance, than just going and getting a job and climbing the ladder. So just maybe think about that career step as maybe it's not very traditional, and I think games is traditional. So do things, I honestly think you've got to do things your way, and not, the industry is young, it's growing, and I don't think there is one right way of getting a career. I guess that's a lukewarm take.
Mark, maybe first, and then Lily.
For me, I went to an art gallery recently and I picked up a brochure there, and it had an article about NFTs in the art world, and it was just like super positive about it, and I was quite surprised to read that because all the press in the games industry has been very negative surrounding NFTs, and I feel kind of on the fence at the moment. I did have someone who I quite trust, but they were saying they were getting into an NFT, they had an idea for it and they wanted us to do a lost words thing with NFTs. I just felt like, because it still seems so early and there's so much negative press around it, like I didn't kind of want to take a stance just yet. I wanted to see how things shake out and sit on the fence, but definitely think some of the sort of negative aspects of things that are being fixed or can be fixed, and it seems there can be some good opportunities around that potentially. I think maybe over time the opinions might change, and when we see studios actually doing a good job with NFTs and using them in a way that's making things better for players and kind of allowing them to buy content and sell it. Because someone was saying with Steam and stuff, when you buy a game, you don't really own that. Like if Steam goes down, then you kind of lost all your content, and whereas if something is like sold as an NFT, it could be that you've got perpetual actual ownership of it, and you can then sell it to other people if you wanted to. But that does seem like a very controversial opinion at the moment, because there's so many people, I think, using NFTs badly and like setting a bad name for it. So, still personally, it's not something I would want to jump into right now, because I want to see how things evolve. But that's my controversial take.
I don't know how much of this is maybe a hot take for games, more the kind of work more broadly in this industry, or across multiple industries. But I have a really big challenge to hustle culture towards the idea that everything you do has to be kind of towards a fixed goal of career advancement. We have a motto between the two of us that we always say, do useless things. Please God, do useless things, because they are very often the things that come back round into your career again. Or if they don't, that's also cool. But for instance, that we've had many times when hobbies of ours, things that we've done completely disconnected from the games industry, have actually ended up being used in projects or being useful or interesting to clients, or something that you can just relate to people. Earlier on, we were in the canteen with a bunch of other of the speakers today, and I said, who plays D&D in this group? And immediately I see the faces light up of various people. It's not strictly relevant to what I do, but I think doing useless things will advance your career. It will help you as a human being and a person. Don't let hustle culture tell you that you need to be the Gary Vee of your world. You can let him if you want to, but that's not how I think that the games industry needs to continue and be run.
I do useless things like working, so I can support my hustle of playing tabletop. That's the order.
Survival obviously is critical. I'm just saying, useless things. Also, I know you guys do, I'm not calling them useless things, but I know Bossa and game jams are really a huge part of your culture. I wouldn't call that a useless thing, but play is important. You work in the play industry. Don't forget to play, I guess, would be another thing.
Yeah, completely. So,
what is your hot take, Nick? As narrative director of Ubisoft, what is your hot take?
Do we keep talking about the industry maturing. I think it must have had the longest puberty in history. But what does mature actually mean? Well, actually, maybe it means cleaning it up from the inside, so it has a more mature approach to how it develops, consciously and with a commitment to doing it right and in an inclusive environment, I think is how I see it now maturing. That's probably the hot topic for me, and seeing how we do that both within small company environments, medium and large environments. So it's nice to see perhaps that maturing maybe means something different other than the acceptance of our, I'm going to say our parents, but she's grandma, who kind of, considers it to be a frivolous thing. I don't think that's the case anymore. I really don't think that's the biggest issue outside of media, perhaps, who still likes to take a rather old-fashioned approach to it. But inside, for me, it's about the maturation of our culture internally, so it's a much more safer environment on which to create.
It's funny, by the way, this is not necessarily a hot take, but just something to watch out for, is that I often see pitches and they name a game, and let's say they're doing a puzzle platformer, and they say, well, my game is going to be really profitable because look at this game called Stilisti, and Stilisti did really well. And I was like, yeah, well, really well is one way to put it. And I was like, you can't, be cautious with building your career and your dreams on outliers. You could be an outlier, but it's like, yes, you might like caviar or oyster. Do you want to eat oyster every single day? You have to have a foundation. And it's so just be cautious. Ambition is great. You should have, ambitions. But then remember that there is a reality of things, and there is, when you talk about indie darlings and your breakout success, and you think that they just sticked it to the man, and whatever, yeah, after having worked 15 years in the industry at EA, and then they went on and sticked it to the man, right? So it's just remember that it's hard work, right? And a lot of it is chance. Just because it doesn't happen to you, especially at a young age, it doesn't mean it's never gonna happen. And just accept that it's work, it's hard work. And yes, there are the wonder kid who is at age of 16 and they made $1 quadrillion with this mobile app. Yeah, sure, but that's not the standard model. The standard model is hard work for a prolonged amount of time to build up a career and build up a success. So just don't buy survivorship bias. Don't necessarily listen. There is this joke that someone who says that you should spend all your money on lottery tickets, because he did. He sold his house, he mortgaged and took all their savings from their parents and just bought a bunch of lottery tickets, and look, they got rich. So, let no one tell you not to buy lottery tickets, because look at me. And I was like, there's survivorship bias. So just be mindful of this. This is a complicated industry which rewards hard work for sure, but also don't just plan for a sprint. Plan for a marathon, because this career is a marathon.
I think along that lines, the amount of indie darlings that actually have had previous studios as well. They've had previous games that have come out and not gone well, or they tried to do so with their partner, it didn't turn out. The game didn't come out at all. It's surprisingly common, and yet no one talks about it because no one likes to talk about their failures. And it's well, that's the thing that we'll all learn from, isn't it? The thing that I also like to point out to students especially is, if you are going to, don't see it as I've gone to work at EA, so therefore I've sold out and things, because at the end of the day, they are paying you and training you. You're literally earning money to learn from them, and learn from their mistakes, learn from their positives, move to a different studio, learn from their mistakes, learn from their positives. I wouldn't be where we are now in terms of our business if I hadn't already worked at multiple different studios, from AAA to mobile and freemium stuff, and all these different brand whips of stuff, because I could say that worked from that studio, that definitely didn't work, I'm never going to do that again.
That's an interesting point. So, I mean, you've answered this question in part already, but I'm surrounded by, I'm the company person here, whereas everyone else on the panel has started up their own their own business, what would you say is the greatest value to having done that? And then opposite that, what's the greatest pain for doing that as well for you? So I can't answer this.
I mean, the greatest pain is that it never switches off, does it? At the end of the day, you're worrying about finance in the business as well as your personal finances. You're worrying about other people's finances, or your employers or employees even. But also at the same time, you do get to change direction. You get to decide exactly what you want to do and when to a certain aspect, and where you want to work, how you're going to work. We're doing 4-day weeks at the moment. We have Wednesdays off normally. This is obviously today. But that means that actually we're taking on developers that are much more family orientated and, much more focused around their personal mental health and things like that. And that they are people that not necessarily been able to work in traditional studios because of the pace and things. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
I mean, I've got to completely agree that I think the biggest downside is probably never switching off. The biggest upside is also never switching off, which is actually really great sometimes. I mean, when you literally are a twin, or you're a clone, you work together, you live together, it can get, obviously, it's no pirates is our life. But that's wonderful on occasion because it's something that you've built, that you've created, and that you're very proud of. I also think, speaking to your point about this idea of agility, our services have changed over the years and developed and become more diversified, actually, because we found that, okay, I've done this, I've worked in strategy, I've worked in branding and creative, but we've also done script writing consultancy on games. We've also, supported development teams. We've done a lot of different things and a lot of different roles, and that is because we run our own business and we were able to say to a client, hey, we've worked with this team, but now we'd love to come across to team B and see what we can offer here. And I don't think many employed positions would offer that kind of flexibility and agility.
Mark?
I think I guess for me one of the difficult things is kind of securing the funding and making sure you've got the runway and and then trying not to worry too much about that, because I hear from lots of studio founders, I think one of the founders of Iron Galaxy was saying, it was quite a few years in before he stopped having sleepless nights over money, because it's, even with the big companies, it's, they're big and they've got, if they've had successful titles, they have a lot of money coming in, but then sometimes, those things can tail off, and if they don't get those same hits, then they've got a really high burn rate, and that's how you see sometimes these companies that seem super successful but still go under. And so it's trying to make sure you've always got the funding and the security and stability. So that's definitely something that's tricky. But then getting to work with really amazing people and having the freedom to shape and grow the team and put your game in front of whoever you want and see those reactions and be able to take it to different events and not have to ask for permission to do that. And then when you see people enjoying your games, it's always the best thing.
Just one more thing to add to that from us is that I think one of the things about running your own thing is you can't be one thing. I think it's impossible to run your own business and say, I'm just going to write code. Because you can't run a business and just write code. Unfortunately, if you want to run a business and do that, you have to learn business skills. And I guess that was an unexpected delight for me to realize that I like business. I don't just like marketing. I like networking. I like promoting myself. I like doing all of those different things. And I think just to bear in mind that it's okay to spend time learning those things too. Learn to negotiate, learn what to charge, learn how contracts work, all that stuff. If you're starting your own thing, you sort of have to be able to wear more than one hat, which can be a pain because no one wants to do that. But once you start, I think you might find that actually you love it.
Definitely, yeah. Sometimes as well, you might even find that you don't get to do that thing that you were doing to begin with at all, right? Jessica Saunders was the sound designer at Lionhead and Rocksteady, and she created her own company, Soundx Games, and then she was hiring someone else to do the audio. She was like, I never thought, when I was starting up, it was like the whole thing was I was going to do 100% of the audio, but but then yeah, you then have to wear that business hat, like you say, all the other hats as well, and marketing and production and everything, and so much so that sometimes you have to make that call of like, should I get in someone else who's perhaps even more experienced, or just has the full time to dedicate to that, rather than me trying to juggle everything myself.
There is a certain, nothing is binary ever, right? And especially in the games industry, but there's a certain stability and focus that being employed by someone else gives, especially if it's a bigger organization, right? Like you can count on the services and the procedures and the support network and all that of a company, which is extremely valuable, right? And it can be very reassuring, and you can get lost in one specific thing because in a bigger company that you're required to do that. Like you're asked to do this kind of subset of a subset of a subset, which is great, right? On the other hand, being independent allows you opportunities to try things which you would not have, and a certain flexibility and a certain opportunity and a certain chance which you would not have otherwise. But I think that what is important is that what do you want to get out of this, right? I know that when we started Bossa Studios over a decade ago, we said that we want to last 6 months. And the reason that was 6 months, because I thought I can go into a job interview and not be embarrassed. So we can say that like, oh yeah, did it 8 months and it didn't work out. Like but if you go in and it's like, yeah, we started our company, it lasted 3.5 months. That's just awkward, right? So we were like 6 months. And so we checked all of our savings and we said, okay, this is how much money we have. We divided it by 6. And this is how much money we can spend per month. So let's get on with it. And it was because we knew that that's what we wanted. And since then, every single time, we were all in, all in, all in. And for us, it meant sometimes that we burnt ourselves really bad and we were really close to closing down. And some other times, we sell a few million copies. And then we use that few million to try the craziest experiments, which are expensive, and then we burn the money away. But then one of the experiments, again, sells a couple of million units. And like, hooray, we have money, let's burn it away. So it was like, but that was us, and it's not for everyone. Like a friend of mine started working, I think, on GTA, at the end of GTA 3 or GTA 4, and worked through 4, worked through 5, working on 6. Oh, sorry, there is a 6th one. So working on 6, and she said that if she could go to pension from having worked on nothing else but Grand Theft Auto, she would be happy. To me, that would be the description of hell. Like I can't imagine. Like give me anxiety. Just hear that. And so you have to match it who you are, and you have to be really honest with yourself, because it's so easy to copy someone else's dream, right? You hear an inspiring video on YouTube about this person of like how they do. Oh, this is so cool, and you try to copy it, and then you just feel uncomfortable in those shoes because they're not your shoes. So it's a lot of soul searching you have to do to find out what it is. And it's okay to change as well. Like I've worked in really big teams and small teams, and at some point I felt I'm ready to start my own, and then we did. So just be honest to yourself.
I think along with that is it's not just in your professional career, but also what you want to do outside in the rest of your life. When we were starting up, we had exactly the same thing of, we've got 6 months, we'll give it 6 months. Because we thought, you know what, we've saved up for a house deposit, but we're not going to buy a house in London because we're never going to be able to afford a house in London. So, when do we start a family? Things like that. So that's like, well, we give it 6 months and we'll see how it goes. And we knew that meant putting off buying a house. It might mean that we might lose our house deposit we've been saving. It might mean that, might not be able to have kids for ages, or stuff like that. So we were like, well, this is something that we have to give a go and give a risk at. And if it turns out fine, then fine. And if not, then not. And fortunately, it turned out fine. But then we found, hold on, getting a mortgage is really hard, like impossibly hard. The daftest thing about that is when you're working for your own company, you can show the mortgage advisors you've got so much money to last you 2 years or something, and yet they're not interested in that. Like, they still think you're super risky. Whereas if you're full-time somewhere, all you need is 3 months worth of pay. You can literally be there for only 3 months You can start there, be there for 3 months, and then you can get a mortgage much easier than someone that's running a business. So it's just silly things like that can affect your whole thing. So it's like, do you want to own a house? Do you want to move around the world and be touring like on the road developer or something? Like, just everything.
That's okay. Only your favorite child goes to university. It's fine.
I know this is a weird side thing, but just, I don't know how many of you here are just focusing on development, but just as a shout out to the marketing people as well here who may be interested in that other side, just want to say that you're quite lucky that making games is incredibly expensive, and being a marketing person, at least when we started and the way we did it, our expenses for our job was very, very, very low in comparison to how people have to deal with massive development teams. So I guess, I know that's a bit of a weird, like a humble brag marketing, but I just think it's worth noting there are more ways of being freelance and owning your own thing than necessary that are really risky, like studios can be. Just a side thing.
Also, just to the point that you were making about having a network, if you are in a place of employment, the chances are you have a lot of people you're connected to. As freelancers or someone who owns their own thing, you can be a bit of an island if you don't make that additional leap to think, well, how am I going to meet people? How do I connect with people? So I think, I mean, to that point, the Women in Games community has been a massive part of our career. And there are many, many different kind of advocacy groups and just networking groups in the games industry. Please avail yourself of them. They are, I mean, ones we've been part of anyway have been fantastic and very welcoming. And if you are going to own your own thing, make sure to get out of your own way sometimes and go speak to some other people who are not working with you.
So, what now is for each of you the next biggest step forward for the industry that you see it taking? In terms of, I suppose, an evolution from where we are now to where you go. I love to ask these horribly complex questions. I can see Mark smiling, so I'm going to go to Mark first. So where do you see the next big evolution?
So I guess for me, I'd often thought with VR, you know, it had the potential to kind of revolutionise lots of different aspects of our lives, and you know, I always felt like shopping, rather than what online shopping is at the moment in this, you know, clunky website, when it's actually harder to kind of browse through than when you're actually just walking through a store and you can see everything on the shelves. Like, I thought if you can have kind of a matrix style thing, but instead of rows of guns, you've just got all these different items in the store and you can fly around, and so, you know, it make it so much easier. And I think there's lots of different, you know, and I guess yeah, a bit of a buzzword, but the metaverse stuff of how everything is going to link up, and I think there's lots of people with quite cynical takes on it, and companies when they're saying, you know, metaverse this and metaverse that, but what they actually mean is like our own closed ecosystem. But the whole point of it is that it's kind of something that brings everything together, and, you know, all different aspects kind of work hand in hand, which is definitely going to be a tricky thing to make happen, and maybe that will work even better for kind of the non-games side of things, because often, you know, I mean, a metaverse just wouldn't work for lots of games. So, you know, if you can take your character with a giant sword into Forza, you know, it kind of breaks Forza, it wouldn't work, and you don't want that, and you don't want people bringing in their like overpowered items or stuff that looks ridiculous and doesn't fit with a game. So I think there's always going to be these, you know, specific siloed things, but then there is just so much potential for you know, different companies working together and making really cool online virtual spaces, and yeah, the like evolution of the internet.
I don't know if I heard you right. Are you suggesting taking a giant sword into Forza? Because that's the best pitch I've heard from NFT ever. Like, I want to have a giant sword in Forza, definitely.
Let's do it.
I mean, to reiterate a little bit of what you said, I think the metaverse and an interconnected 3D internet is something that I'm very interested in seeing the development of. I think that needs to be underpinned by proper infrastructure, and I think that's what we're currently missing, is the regulation and the infrastructure to make that both safe and actually technologically viable and not just a pipe dream. So that's something I'm really excited for on the technological side, but as you sort of already covered some of that, just a side other thing, I think diversity is going to be something that will be happening in games across the next few years. I think that the face of games is changing, and it's no longer just being a boys' club. And I think that's something that is increasingly happening across as an industry, as professionals, and actually in games themselves, the kind of characters we're seeing. And I'm very much looking forward to that developing.
Yeah, I think it's our responsibility as developers to make sure we put effort into hiring the most diverse teams we can to represent on our development teams the diversity that we're seeing in the player base, and also just because more diverse teams have different and better ideas and make better games.
Totally.
I mean, I kind of touched on this a tiny bit earlier, but I just think that this collapsing of the idea of game is something that maybe touches on this idea of the 3D internet, but also more broadly, you talk about how the entertainment industry is coming closer and closer to interactive experiences. You mentioned even the NHS getting involved in game-like and play-like experiences. I think we're going to see that happening a lot. And I think that when we watch Netflix, when we watch films in the cinema, when we play games on our phone, all these experiences are going to become more and more seamlessly connected, to the point when I think that professionals in the industry are going to, I think in a very exciting way, having to reach out and work with one another in new and exciting, innovative ways, and creating kind of strange and exciting interactive experiences, which you could call games, and in the future might just be called life, and it might just be called entertainment. And I think that that's going to evolve massively and very, very quickly.
So, I mean, I guess in being in Cornwall, the biggest thing that sorts of from the social background, from what I hear from town people, like my neighbours and things, it's really this sort of green revolution. And now we've started to have a diversity revolution in games, accessibility revolution in games, but and we've obviously talking about the metaverse, and we touched on it in NFTs, but I mean, I'm not a massive eco person myself, as they think, but I think actually this idea of having green eco-friendly games developed socially responsibly and stuff, and actually I suspect that things like grant applications, that will start to be a requirement, what's your carbon footprint and things like that. So I think surprisingly, I think that's gonna start to affect the industry sooner than we think, especially when we start talking to Cornwall Council and things. I can imagine that sort of thing. Cornwall Council wants to be carbon neutral by this state. Local town council wants to be carbon neutral by this state, which means any people they work with need to be carbon neutral. So yeah, that's going to start being a thing sooner rather than later. So it's not necessarily a cool, fun revolution, but it's certainly one that we're going to have to think about.
Totally.
Amazing. Okay, thanks very much indeed. I'd like to thank Mark. Very nice to see you again, sir. I'd like to thank Mark Backler. I'd like to thank Violet and Lily. I'd like to thank Katie very much for an interesting panel. Thank you very much indeed.